Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm sure some folks are probably still going to trickle in here, but want to keep things on time. So welcome. My name is Maureen Gribble, and I'm joined today by two of my colleagues with UE Systems, Doug Wagen and Adrian Messer. And we thought we'd try something a little different this month. You guys are probably used to seeing us bring in a guest speaker from a different company with a presentation on various topics, and we love those, and we're obviously going to keep doing those. But we thought with us just getting back from our 9th annual Ultrasound World that we would put together a little roundtable discussion just so that we could kind of talk through the lessons learned from the conference to help benefit those of you that maybe weren't able to join us in Florida 2 weeks ago. And then for those of you that were at Ultrasound World, hopefully this will be a good refresher and just kind of keep you on track with the things that we learned and keep you motivated to hopefully try and implement some of the things that we talked about. So, bear with us. We're kind of trying something different, and we hope this will be kind of a fun, casual, more conversational presentation than maybe what we're used to doing. So just a quick overview, we had over 100 attendees there from all across the globe. We had attendees from South Africa, from Europe, India, just all over the place. So it was really great, really diverse group of folks. But of course, bringing us all together was just sort of the common theme of reliability and of course ultrasound. So it was really great to see so many folks that made quite an effort to join us. We also were joined by several solution providers, so we had some great exhibits set up and great opportunities for the attendees to go around and really have good conversations about what these service providers might be able to offer to help improve the various programs that the attendees have going on at their facilities. So we definitely want to give a shout out and another big thank you publicly to Allied Reliability, Infraspection Institute, PDMA, R&G Laboratories, SMRP, and United Infrared. So again, thank you to all of those folks for joining us and being a part of the conference. I think that's always a good value add to be able to have those folks there. Obviously, the education and the things that we're going to talk to you about today is always the #1 priority for us, but obviously the networking opportunities and the ability to sit down and have conversations with folks from across the globe is a really big part of the conference, and it goes without saying that probably one of the most valuable pieces of the conference are those relationships that you build and the friends that you get to see year after year and the new friends that you make. So we hope that those relationships continue now that everybody's back and that everybody's kind of grown their network of peers that they can lean on when they're struggling with something or need some advice. So of course, we do try to offer networking opportunities outside of Ultrasound World with our LinkedIn and our blog and Twitter. So hopefully, those of you who weren't able to be in person, you're still taking advantage of those opportunities that we've got. So we can talk a little more about those here towards the end. And just a quick overview, so we were able this year to implement a pre-conference workshop. So we had Chris Colson and Shannon Livingston from Allied Reliability come and do a 4-hour lubrication workshop. And it was really, really well done, really well received, and then just a great way to kick off the conference. We had a keynote from Senator Paul Campbell, which we'll talk a little bit about, and 14 education sessions and certification testing from SMRP. We actually had 12 of our attendees sit for the Certified Maintenance and Reliability Professional exam, and 3 attendees sat for the Certified Maintenance and Reliability Technician exam. So just a great sign that the folks that were there really are dedicated to improving themselves, really becoming, big reliability thought leaders. So we wish all of those folks luck, as they're probably going to start getting those results here shortly. So just a real quick housekeeping before we kick things off. We do have the ability for you all to type in questions. We'll try to get to those as we're going through, or we've obviously got a section at the end where we can answer questions. So just type those into the little question box and we'll do our best to get those answered. And also, we are recording this, so we're going to be posting it just like all of our other ones, posting it on our website, and we will email everybody once once we've got these up and online. So without further ado, we'll just kind of kick off. So as I said, we started with a keynote from Senator Paul Campbell. He's a state senator out of South Carolina, spent his career working for Alcoa, and he's just a really great person to have kicked things off, really great motivational speaker. You'll see here on the screen, I won't read through them all, but he talked through the 6 traits of being an effective leader, and his talks on leadership and were really motivational, and you can really tell the proof is in the pudding, because when he started at Alcoa, he was actually sent to the Mount Holly facility to harvest the assets and to close that facility down. And instead he got there and saw the potential, was able to implement, reliability best practices, and with his leadership, not only did they not have to lay anybody off, but for the last 20 plus years, it's been one of their most productive, profitable facilities. So it just goes to show that, with leadership and reliability, that you can really make good things happen. So that was a really great session. Adrian, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Senator Campbell, I've had the opportunity to hear him present several times since, I am from South Carolina, but he's full of quotes, and one of the quotes that I use in a lot of my presentations comes from him, and he says that maintenance and reliability should be viewed as a competitive advantage and not a necessary evil. And there's a lot of truth in that, because I'm sure a lot of you out there feel like, sometimes you're viewed as that necessary evil, but, when you have, well-established, robust reliability programs, there's certainly a lot of advantages to that, not only competitive advantage, but also from a plant performance and productivity standpoint, a people advantage, you've got good people working for you, and then, the safety aspect as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And another quote that I really resonated with me was, don't personalize failure. Failure is an event, not a person. And I just think that's, something we can all try to remind ourselves of. It's so easy to get caught up in the finger pointing and placing blame, but really let's figure out why it happened and move on and fix the process. So I think that was just a great way to kick things off.
Well, and I think that the cool part about, this is Doug, by the way, I think the cool part about Senator Campbell's presentation, for me, comes down to a lot of the things he talked about. It doesn't just apply to takeaways where you can go back and use it where you work. It's things you can use in your everyday relationships with your family, with your friends. Some of the stuff I really liked his discussion on, build relationships out of trust. I mean, sort of one of the things I always think about is, say what you're going to do and then do what you say. If people can trust you, you're going to be able to develop that relationship better with them, and things can get accomplished. If there's a lot of distrust out there, whether it's in your business environment, whether it's your personal environment, things don't get accomplished. And he spent a lot of time on that. I think it's a great way to kick off the conference was the discussions on people should trust each other.
Yeah. So if anybody is at a conference where you see the senator's going to be speaking, definitely be sure to get there and in that session, because he does a great job and one of the better speakers that I've had the ability to hear. So that was great. All right. So kind of sticking on the leadership topic, we were able to have Tim Gossard from GP Allied come and shared his thoughts on really building reliability within your organization. So Doug, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what your takeaways were from that session.
Sure. Tim's been at just about every ultrasound world we've done, and I've seen him numerous times at other conferences. I've seen him speak, and while he's always really good, I think that this year, I could truly say he was on fire. I mean, some of the things he talked about that really stood out to me, is sort of tying your reliability initiative to the corporate goals and vision. And another huge one for me with Tim was to find and educate somebody. What he did in Cargill was find and educate somebody in each of the business units on what they were trying to accomplish and how they wanted to accomplish it. So you've got sort of that buy-in on the corporate level, as well as going out and educating the people that are in the plants and actually doing it. A couple other things that I really liked. was where he discussed finding allies. In other words, go out and find people in different businesses inside of your own organization or different departments in your own organization and help to educate them on your success. A lot of successful reliability programs, sort of a key common denominator is that, people sell it. People are able to go out and solicit help from other parts of the organization because they show their success and they sell it to people. And then the last thing that I think is critically important to anybody who's going out and trying to start a reliability initiative or ramp up or expand their reliability initiative is do your research and try to partner with the best in the business. I know that when Tim was at Cargill, one of the things that they did is they put in place a select supplier program where they had a steering committee that was basically tasked with making the decisions of who they would partner with for everything from motor supplies to PDM test equipment. And they went out and put all these companies through sort of a multi-step process, and they were able to analyze who was going to deliver the best value to Cargill, not who was the cheapest, not which company they were going to deal with was the biggest, but they factored everything together and who delivered the best value. And I think, he did a webinar for us a few months ago on select suppliers, and that was something he touched on in his presentation, and I think that's really, really important for anybody out there to start looking at who delivers the best value to them in who's supplying them with products and services.
Yeah, one thing that really struck me about Tim too was the fact that he took it upon himself to become a champion for reliability within Cargill. He basically just stood up and said, there's got to be a better way. What is that way? And he went out and educated himself and really, kind of set the standard within that organization. And that can, you can apply that to a lot of different things, but it's the same if you're using ultrasound or if you're using infrared camera or vibration analysis. It really takes a champion to take that piece of equipment and take it out and actually use it, and not just have it sitting around and say, yeah, we've got an instrument, but being able to take it out and use it and say, hey, I know there's a better way, and I know there's some positive things that can come out of this. So that was one thing that really struck me about his presentation.
And to be able to do that, just to expand on that for a second, Adrian, to be able to do that, one of the things Tim always talks about is you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to take risk. You've got to take personal risk to go out and do what you believe in and do what you think is right. And he did that throughout his career and was very successful in implementing, and advancing reliability inside of Cargill because of that personal risk. I mean, you risk getting fired if it doesn't work, but you also, by taking that risk, you also get to reap the benefits of a very successful initiative or a very successful program.
Exactly.
Great. So again, sort of sticking still to kind of the business of reliability side of things, we had Steve Mikolajczak, who's obviously very familiar with what Tim was able to accomplish, and he was a part of that because Steve works for Cargill still, and he came and talked to us about effective budgeting and how you really should look at the budgeting that you do as far as your maintenance budget is concerned. So Doug, maybe you can shed some light on some of the things he talked about.
Yeah, I had three things that really stood out to me when listening to Steve discuss this topic. One of them was his discussion on usage versus cost. A lot of people get very caught up when they're doing their budgets. They get very caught up in the individual price of items, especially something like a commodity item. The example he used was tires. And, he needed to educate his procurement people because the price of tires went up 18%. So what happened is right away they were looking at, maybe buying lower quality tires, or maybe looking at, trying to squeeze the supplier because the price of the tires went up by 18%. But really, in the end, what happened was just by looking at other measures, improving the reliability of and Steve works in a salt facility, a business unit that has several salt plants, by looking at improving the reliability of the trucks that they're using to transport the salt and the movers, the diggers and the movers that they use in their mining operations. They increased the reliability of those. They cleaned up the area where those trucks were operating and made sure that they were driving on better surfaces. and they were actually able to reduce the usage by 27.5%. So even though the price of the individual tires went up 18%, their usage, how many tires they actually used, went down by 27%. So they actually netted out ahead and were able to keep the same select supplier that they had worked with in the beginning to get the quality tires. They just did other measures to reduce the amount of tires they were using. So that was a huge takeaway for me. You look at reliability when you have rising costs of commodity items and items you use in your facility or for your maintenance department. That improvement in reliability, if you take a close look at it, sometimes can offset the price increases. And along the same lines, another big takeaway for me with Steve was, go in and do a full inventory on what you have in your stores and get rid of obsolete items. What he found in some of their storerooms was they had parts for equipment that they no longer used. So why keep those parts around? And those parts actually end up being part of, your overall budget. So he was able to reduce those numbers. And the last thing that I liked about Steve's presentation was, and I think you can sort of apply this to everyday life. They had a supplier for belts, pulleys and belts and things, and the belt prices were lower if they bought in quantity. So it's sort of the Sam's Club mentality or the BJ's Warehouse mentality, where if you buy in quantity, you get cheaper prices. But they took a close look at what they were actually using, how many belts they were actually using, and it turned out by some implementing some reliability in proper tensioning and doing some things on the actual assets, they were able to lower the use of the belts, and then the reorder, the automatic reorder, had to be adjusted because they were reordering belts based on their old system where they were using, I think it was 5 belts per unit per year, and they got better pricing by ordering 5 belts. So pretty soon it started stacking up and stacking up. Whereas by taking a look and improving some reliability, they were using less belts, and they didn't need to take advantage of the quantity discount anymore. They could keep much less, numbers in inventory, and it was far more economical that way.
Yeah, and I am definitely a sucker for those buying in bulk to get the discount, and I know it really doesn't always end up saving you any money, so you end up throwing a lot of stuff away, but that definitely was a good takeaway for sure.
And he pointed out that they had their procurement had a ton of automatic reorders built into their system, where it would just every so many months, it would just automatically reorder at that quantity. So by going in and adjusting that, they were able to reduce significantly their maintenance spend on a lot of commodity items. So it was really interesting to see him actually sort of put the numbers out there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so kind of now moving into some of the technologies and things that we started to talk about and the reliability pieces. We had a couple presentations that were geared around lubrication, and the first, as I mentioned, was the pre-conference workshop with Chris Colson and Shannon Livingston from Allied. And Adrian, I think you definitely had a lot of aha moments with this one, so I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, certainly. As Maureen mentioned, something new to this year's conference was our offering of a pre-conference workshop, and we hope to be able to continue that next year. But this year we had, Chris and Shannon with GP Allied, and the topic really helped to kind of set the tone for the rest of the conference, because really so much of ultrasound world this year had to do with the greater reliability picture in general and not just specifically on ultrasound. So, one of the quotes that they started out with was that the fact that lubricant is the lifeblood of rotating assets. And then they continued on that quote and said, your components want to live, but poor lubrication practices can limit their life. And there's certainly a lot of truth in that. And then they kind of led into, their keys to an effective lubrication program, which number one is the storage. And they kind of kept reiterating the fact that you need to keep your lubricant cool, clean, and dry. That's easy to remember. And then the selection, selecting the right lubricant for the right application. And a lot of that would probably come from having a good relationship with your lubricant supplier, who actually where you get your lubricant from, having a good relationship. They know your application, they know your equipment, they know your process, and they can then recommend a good lubricant for that process. And then contamination control and filtration and education. It sounds simple, but educating those who are responsible for lubricating the equipment on the importance of using the right grease for the right application. Inventory management, ordering according to usage rates and storage conditions, that was important. And several of the presentations, the next one included Terry Harris, we're talking about, testing and sampling new oil once it's delivered. A lot of times your oil that's delivered is not as clean as you would think it.
Well, I think we lost Adrian there, but
from the
there you go.
Yeah, from your supplier. And then finally, they mentioned ultrasound. Making use of the grease caddy to prevent over and under lubrication in your rotating equipment is really becoming a must for those of you that are focusing on reliability-centered lubrication efforts. And then finally, it's the green thing to do. If you think about it, reliability-centered lubrication, you're using less space by optimizing, how much lubricant you're keeping in storage. It saves time and labor costs, especially with the grease caddy. You're spending less time out in the field. Lubricating equipment, you're not lubricating everything based off of a PM. It becomes more condition-based. It increases the longevity of your equipment and your assets. If you look at lubrication, the biggest cause of premature bearing failure is lubrication-related, either over-lubricated or under-lubricated. And then there's less waste. Certainly, reduce your carbon footprint by reducing your carbon products.
Yeah, and so along those lines, we also had Terry Harris, as Adrian mentioned, came and focused more on effective lubrication storage, and some of you might be familiar with this topic as he did this same webinar for us a couple months back, but was able to add a few new things. So Adrian, maybe talk a little bit more about the things he mentioned as far as the actual storage is concerned.
Yeah, Terry, he always does a great job, and he's, as Maureen mentioned, he's done several webinars for us in the past, and again, they're archived if you want to take a look at them. But the major lubricant failure modes, you've got temperature, moisture, foreign materials, viscosity, and contamination. And if you look at those 5 major lubricant failure modes, 4 of them have to do with storage, how your lubricant is stored. So, the reasons to have it, again, just from a failure mode standpoint, you're trying to eliminate those failure modes. Then the inventory control part of it, you're able to monitor and keep track of how much lubricant you're actually using. Making sure that they're stored in a controlled temperature, humidity. Again, it's all about trying to eliminate your failure modes. And then, another thing that Terry mentioned that I thought was a key takeaway was it's important to develop written procedures that define what happens with the lube, with each lubricant that you're using from the time it's delivered until the time it's in use. And having those procedures in place, again, it kind of helps to educate those responsible for lubricating equipment, and really kind of helps to focus on lubrication excellence. And if you're going to have true lubrication excellence, it has to include those effective procedures, and storage is certainly a part of that. And then he also kind of stressed the fact that you want to test. You always want to make sure that your filter, you're doing the proper sampling, making sure that you are taking the samples correctly. All of these things kind of come into play, for you to get good results from your sampling. And a lot of it relates back to the storage issues here.
Yeah, I really thought the lubrication presentations were great, and it just seemed like this is an area it just seems like it should be so simple to try and take what you've learned from this and implement it, and without a whole lot of cost. I mean, you're already buying the lubrication anyway, so why not determine if you can buy less and keep it around a little bit longer, and really save some money, save some equipment, and really get some best practices in place. So I thought those were 2 really excellent talks, so that was great.
Yeah.
So moving on, we had Tim Dunton, and you'll see he pops up again towards the end. He was able to fill in and present a second presentation for us, kind of on the fly, which was great. But his first talk he did was in regards to hydraulic systems, and I know I specifically kind of glanced over at Adrian while he was talking, and you could just see the light bulbs going off. So again, Adrian, maybe I'll kick it to you to kind of review some of those lessons.
Yeah, sure. And Tim's first presentation here had to do with an application that we're seeing more and more out in the field, and that's on using ultrasound on hydraulics and fluid powered systems. So it was certainly a very timely presentation. But he started out by talking about the system as a whole, in the design of the system, the precision of the system, not just the system in general, but the equipment and all the components of the system. Making sure that you've got the proper equipment in place, and then the commissioning. How you start up your machine, how you start up the system, and then when it comes to operating, operating the equipment within its context or design. And I will say there, the operating context should be well communicated, and including the operators. They should be educated on the importance of operating the system within its limits and what it was designed to do. And then he went in to continue that, once you have it up and operating, proper condition monitoring, including ultrasound, and then your basic routine proper maintenance that you would do, and preventive maintenance that you would do on the system. And, one of Tim's quotes that he used, which can apply to not just to hydraulics, but a lot of items when it comes to reliability, is, the failures that happen today didn't start yesterday. And, there's certainly a lot of truth in that for sure. And then as far as what we can do with ultrasound, what we can use ultrasound for on these hydraulics and fluid power systems, and most of these are going to be contact applications. So if those of you out there, if you have hydraulics in your facility, you would certainly want to be using the contact probe for these applications. We've got internal leakage, leakage of relief valves, accumulator operation, cylinders, rod misalignment. Rotary actuators, again, that would be internal leakage, cavitation in your pumps, and then filter bypass. Filter bypass creates a lot of ultrasound that would be easily detectable. As far as the frequency selection, so if you do have an ultraprobe and you're interested in using ultrasound for these applications, Tim mentioned that they've had a lot of success on using 40 kilohertz. I know in our training classes we teach for internal leakage, somewhere between 20 kilohertz and 40 kilohertz as a general range. But I think you'll find the optimal to be either 25 kilohertz or 40 kilohertz. So some really good information there, again, from an application course out in the field.
And I had a big thing that I wanted to mention with Tim's presentation, and I think it actually applies to a lot of the presentations we saw, and you can sort of see it as a theme. A lot of maintenance professionals and solution providers, even us as UE Systems, we tend to live on that PF curve between the point P and F. For those of you who have seen the PF curve, it's the point that failure can be detected to the point where that asset functionally fails. And what Tim sort of pointed out, and actually, Maureen, if you go back one slide, yeah. What Tim pointed out is more, I've seen some expanded P to F curves where it's sort of the I to P to F, the installation to the point where failure can be detected, to the point where you have a full functional failure. We need to be more involved in the design of our equipment. We need to be more involved in the commissioning. Most of the presenters on the reliability side of things this year at the conference, in one way or another, brought this into their discussion. I know, Tim talked about it, Senator Campbell talked about it. It's not enough to be really good failure finders. You really need to start at the beginning when you're designing, commissioning, installing your equipment. You need to have reliability in mind there. And I think Tim did a great job of pointing that out. Then that point in the curve, that I to P, if you can extend that out, then you're really making progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a theme throughout the conference for sure. So, moving along, we also, we're always every year so fortunate to have, actual customers of ours come and present, and it's always so great to see them really become the experts. They've taken the equipment and really learned what they can, and the ways that we find that they end up implementing the technology into their programs. We learn so much from them, and so these next couple presentations will go over our actual customers who really came and wowed us with what they had to say. So first is Robin Thon with Albany International, and Doug, I'll kind of toss it over to you for this one.
Okay, yeah, Robin did a great job of actually laying out what he's doing in the paper industry. A lot of us sort of tend to focus on let's find these problems because we don't want downtime. But really his focus in this was to show that while they didn't want downtime, even more important, they wanted to make sure that their production quality wasn't affected by having failures. So what they did is by combining the use of ultrasound and infrared and getting production involved. And I think this is a huge thing. It's not just a maintenance issue. They wanted production to be involved in it because they could demonstrate that by having their assets run more reliably, that they could actually come up with higher quality and higher throughput. So I think that was sort of the theme of his presentation, that they were able to pick out potential failures early enough that they didn't have any quality issues, and there was no production slowdowns or interruption. So, I mean, good quality functioning equipment, he says here at the end, is equal to good quality production, and he really hit the nail on the head with that.
Definitely. And next we had, if I can get my slides to move forward here, we had V. Guidry from DuPont, and he had a really great presentation, and his job really is to go around to the various DuPont facilities and do compressed air leak surveys and steam trap surveys. So his talk, he had some really great data to share, and Doug, maybe you can hit on some of the things that jumped out at you.
Well, the first thing that jumped out at me with V's presentation was his focus on involvement. He travels to a lot of different plants, and the first thing he does when he gets to these plants is before he goes out and does a survey, is tries to educate the people in the maintenance department and the people in the engineering department, tries to educate them on what he's about to go do and why it's important. He shows them cost numbers. He shows them results from other surveys he's done in other plants. And that's a huge thing for him to be able to show them, this is what we're going to come in and do. It's a great way to get a lot of buy-in. He also talked a little bit about safety. It's not just finding leaks out there for the sake of the cost. A lot of it was finding different leaks in materials other than compressed air or fairly inert gases. DuPont actually has a lot of potentially dangerous gases. So he said he was able to, at the same time doing some of the leak surveys and the steam audits, he was able to identify some other leaks. So don't be so focused on, the job at hand. In other words, if you're going to do a compressed air survey, don't be so focused on that you ignore the possibility of, while you're already out there, finding some other problems. Another part that he mentioned is, and I think, again, this is sort of a theme from a lot of the presenters and a lot of the people who led our discussions this year, was that he constantly is selling it. He's constantly selling his program and getting buy-in. He's on the DuPont website. He advertises results of surveys. He does webinars. He does training classes for anybody who's interested in participating. And I think that's important because it's sort of a group effort. When you talk about energy savings, it's not enough to just do an air survey or do a gas survey or a steam survey. It's huge to get everybody's buy-in. And the last thing, that really blew me away, he said, while compressed air was a big number, he said the biggest part of their energy costs came from steam trap failures. He's done some extensive steam trap audits, and talk about $6.5 million since 2006 in leaking steam traps. So it was pretty huge. It was pretty huge. He gave us a lot of good information.
Yeah, and we're excited that actually, and you guys will see I've got a save the date slide as we get towards the end of the presentation, but V is actually going to present his presentation from Ultrasound World as our webinar that we're doing in July. So obviously we'll be getting information and invitations out to you guys for that as we get closer. But his was definitely a great presentation, and you know, Doug hit some of the highlights, but it's certainly one that I think everybody would benefit from hearing from start to finish. So we're excited about that.
I'll just say too, you know, kind of the theme from these practitioner presentations was, you know, the importance of documentation. You know, he's done a great job, and he's been able to document some tremendous numbers within DuPont on how they've been able to use ultrasound to, you know, identify and correct defects that negatively impact energy use. So again, I would just say, you know, documentation has become critical for maintenance and reliability professionals.
Definitely. And keeping along the line with our customers here, the next one we had Chuck Jarrell and Larry Shine from Novozymes, and these guys are customers that Adrian works directly with, and as they were presenting, you could just see how proud Adrian was of the great things they've been able to do with the ultrasound equipment in just the short amount of time that they've had it. And so Adrian, I know you're anxious to jump in and talk about what they had to say.
Yeah, again, another good practitioner presentation, and one of the neat things about our jobs is what we do is we're able to work with people who are, you know, just beginning ultrasound programs. So we kind of work with them in the beginnings. We make recommendations as far as equipment, what they need, how they can use ultrasound, and apply it to, you know, what they're trying to achieve. And then we kind of see that program continue to grow, and we're there to kind of support them. And I have really enjoyed getting to work with Larry and Chuck and their staff up there in Franklinton. So they've had their equipment now for about 1.5 years, and just in that short amount of time, they've been able to do some fantastic things with ultrasound. And again, they started out by building a business case, and their justification and documentation there was critical to show the benefits of what they could do with ultrasound, and because they planned ahead of time and did all the legwork, once they got the equipment, they were able to really hit the ground running, and once they got their equipment, they really just took off with it. But prior to ultrasound, and they presented, you know, 2 or 3 examples of how they're using ultrasound, but one example was on a critical piece of equipment that's critical to their process. It's called a chopper. But prior to ultrasound, they were having an average of 8 critical equipment failures on these choppers every year. And again, it's very critical to the process. It's expensive from a downtime standpoint. But 3 of their choppers had a history of frequent and random failures. And each one of these failures had an average cost of around $64,000, $65,000 for each occurrence. And so they set them up on an ultrasound route, you know, taking initial data, including sound files. They're using UltraPro 15,000, and they established baselines once they had, you know, some history taken, historical readings taken. But since implementing ultrasound in 2012, about mid-2012, they've had no failures on their choppers, which again, not only has saved them or $65,000 per failure, but again, there's no downtime, so it's very critical to the process. So that was tremendous. They've also presented some documentation on savings from compressed air leak spreadsheets that they've been able to generate through our UltraTrend DMS software, and to date have had savings in excess of $59,000 from just compressed air leaks alone. And they already have a plan for the future, so not only did they plan prior to implementing ultrasound, but now they plan for the future, and they're looking at expanding out into steam traps and electrical inspection. But again, it just proves the fact that documentation has just become so critical. I mean, you've got to be out there, you know, if you're out taking data, you've got to be able to document and show you know, your findings. You know, you've got to be able to document and show your justification.
Yeah, one of the things I loved in this presentation, and we tend to, when we see our customers present things like this, we tend to learn a little something from each presentation. And this one, the big, giant, aha moment, as Maureen says for me, was one of the things that they're doing with their UltraPro 15,000 with the built-in digital camera that I never even thought of and when Chuck was discussing it, I mean, my eyes opened up. I was like, wow, that's a great idea. When they identify a defect, they immediately take a picture of it, and in addition to generating the report and generating a work order to have that defect looked at, they send a copy of that picture to their planner so that they have some advance notice that they're going to need parts to do a motor replacement or a bearing replacement or fix a steam trap. Once the planner has the notes and the picture, they're able to kit that up. And what Chuck was saying is they've actually cut back on the time it takes for that planner to put together, the job plan and to have all the parts ready. They're able to plan more jobs because they get that picture up front and they know exactly which parts to have ready. So it was pretty amazing use of the digital camera. I really love that on the documentation side of things.
Yeah, it was very brilliant, and it just kind of puts another aspect, a new aspect on just how people are using ultrasound technology in, again, the whole reliability process.
Yeah, and again, this one, obviously you can hear how excited we were about this presentation. So this is another one that we've invited them to come and do a webinar, and they're going to join us next month. So that one's really coming up. So again, you guys can benefit from hearing what they've done, for their journey from the beginning. So we're excited about that. So moving along here, just to keep our time. Next up, we had Jacob Bro from Swagelok Energy Advisors, and we really got into, obviously, steam here. So, Doug, maybe you can take us through some of what Jacob had to say.
Sure. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is, they really focus, and a lot of the customers they go and work with, they really focus on steam leaks because a lot of their customers have green initiatives. So by having an excessive number of steam leaks, which are easily detectable, you can actually have a dramatic impact on your emissions, on your overall emissions. From what Jason was saying, steam leaks offer probably the highest payback inside of a plant from an energy standpoint, and most of them can be repaired without any capital costs. So a lot of these steam leaks that they were finding, a huge percentage of them, are just a matter of either an improper application or something needs to be tightened. There's a tremendous number of examples he cited where there's no capital cost or major improvement needed. It's just making some minor repairs. But I think the biggest thing that Jacob pointed out was he had an example in one of his slides where he compared a compressed air leak to a steam leak. And we all tend to focus on compressed air. Oh, it's so expensive. It's a huge cost to a plant, big opportunity. But if your plants are using steam, he pointed out that a compressed air leak at 100 psi, and the size of the leak is 1/8 of an inch at 5 cents a kilowatt hour to produce your electricity, you're looking at an annual savings by repairing that of $2,095, so right around $2,000. The same pressure, same size leak at $10 per 1,000 pounds of steam is over $3,500 a year, $3,591. So it sort of was an eye-opener that, wow, you don't realize how much steam is actually costing you. You sort of walk around plants and you see these white plumes everywhere, and you're like, wow, that's a huge, huge energy opportunity. And then the last thing I'll mention about Jacob's presentation was when you do see those plumes of steam, safety is something you immediately have to think about. You want to maintain your utilities from a cost perspective, but also having all that fogs and so forth in production areas and anywhere around your steam system creates a huge safety hazard. So it was a big eye-opener, and I think a lot of incentive to go out and take a look, for those of you who are using steam, take a hard look at your steam system and what's going on in it.
And you mentioned safety, and I think that's another word and theme that we heard in I think every single presentation, and I really liked that because I think we can talk energy savings and dollar savings and production and all this all day, but you know, to me, safety is something that always needs to stay at the forefront. So I was happy that did come up in all the presentations. That was really good. Next up, we had Noah Bethel with PDMA, and he came and talked to us a little bit about process analysis and really understanding exactly what you're doing and how it can be telling you more than what you think. So Doug, I'll kick it to you again for this one.
Sure. A couple of comments about Noah's presentation. I mean, Noah is a veteran of ultrasound world. He's done some great things. He's talked about some great case studies over the years. This year, his presentation was fantastic. Now, Noah is much, much smarter than me, so it was very difficult for me to understand a lot of what he was talking about. But what I will say is my big takeaway from Noah's presentation was he's out there looking at things, and a lot of people are out there with an individual technology. In this case, it was motor circuit analysis. And you tend to have blinders on, and you say, okay, I'm going to go look at my rotor, my stator. I'm going to do the things that and evaluate the things that motor circuit analysis can tell me. But by digging a little deeper into it, what Noah said is he's actually using that motor almost like its own transducer or its own accelerometer or sensor, where by looking at the signatures when he has the motor circuit analysis tools hooked up to it, he can identify that there's other things going on, like bad bearings, like a misalignment, things like that. And by using the motor circuit analysis, it'll actually be a catalyst, or it can direct you to go use some other technologies, like pull out your ultrasound detector, pull out a vibration analyzer, and take a closer look at what those signatures are telling you. So my thing with Noah's presentation was, don't be so focused when you're using one technology on the specific tests that technology can do. Start looking at some of the other things it tells you. He said at the end of his presentation, don't have tunnel vision, which is true. Don't be myopic and focus on just the motor circuit analysis part of it. See what that data can tell you and where it can lead you with other technologies.
Great. So we'll move on here. We had Chuck Peterson come and reviewed some of the things he's doing with predictive technologies. And Adrian, maybe you can give us a quick roundup of his talk.
Yeah, sure. Again, Chuck is a veteran ultrasound world speaker, and his previous ultrasound world presentations, I believe, are archived on our website. But yeah, Chuck is a service provider out of Hutchinson, Kansas, and he's used infrared and ultrasound for many years. And he basically presented on some of his finds from his time out in the field doing service work for his customers. But he kind of stressed the fact that he was finding problems first with ultrasound and then confirming with infrared. Again, it kind of goes back to the previous presentation with Noah, how you need to really make use of a multiple technology approach when it comes to your condition monitoring. But some of the problems that Chuck has been able to find with ultrasound first and confirm with infrared are soft foot, misalignment, which I believe is the second leading cause of premature bearing failure, greasing problems, which we've already mentioned is the biggest cause of premature bearing failures, and then mechanical looseness. So I would encourage you to take a look at Chuck's presentation. I'm sure we'll probably have these up on the website fairly soon. But he actually presented several case studies, several finds. He had sound file examples. He had both the ultrasound data as well as the infrared pictures on these different applications and these different finds. And again, I would just encourage you to take a look at his presentation once we get it up on the website, so you can actually see the ultrasound compared to the infrared.
And moving on to the electrical side of things, we had another veteran of ultrasound world, Joe Gerlach, with TEG come, and he spent actually quite a bit of time with us, and actually had folks with their computers out actually analyzing sound files with the structural analysis software. So that was pretty cool. And Doug, maybe you can give a quick recap of what he had to say.
Sure. I've had an opportunity to work with Joe quite a bit over the past 10 years. He's really been sort of a pioneer in the ultrasound electrical analysis side of things, not just detecting problems like corona, tracking, arcing, but actually being able to analyze. And in recent history, the last couple of years, based on his case studies that he's seen in the field and working real close with a lot of customers that have electrical issues, we're able to start to be able to much better gauge severity by using the FFT and the time waveform, from the recorded signals we're getting with the ultrasonic detectors. One of the points that Joe made was that you really need to sort of look at three things when you're looking at a time waveform of a suspected electrical anomaly. One is, how much does the amplitude change? Not how loud it is, or not how high the amplitude is. How much does it change up and down? The more it changes, the more there's an issue going on. The second thing is basically how many little pops or how many little cracks or how many anomalies take place. The more anomalies and the more the amplitude changes up and down, the more severe it's getting. And then when an anomaly does take place or when something does happen that you see on that waveform, how long does it last? So if those three things, how much the amplitude changes, how often something occurs, and when it occurs, how long does it last? When those three things start to change and amplitude's going up and down, more events, and they're lasting longer, the severity's getting worse. And what was really interesting is to see that visually as well as being able to listen to it. So Joe's done a couple webinars for us. If you're doing any electrical inspections out there, I'd strongly encourage you to go review some of the webinars he's done in the past and see the kind of finds they've been able to come up with. It's pretty incredible.
Definitely. That's always, his presentations are always the most, downloaded after the fact from our website, people going and rewatching those and really trying to get as much from them as they can. So we'll have that up soon, and like Doug said, we've got previous webinars and presentations he's done for us on our website, so definitely check those out. As I mentioned, we were going to hit Tim Dunton up again. He was able to come back and did a talk for us on managing metrics and KPIs, and this is a presentation that we're also going to be lucky to have as a webinar later in the summer. We're still working on a date with that, but that's certainly one you'll want to also try to attend. So Adrian, maybe you can walk us through what he had to say about managing your metrics and how to best implement those.
Yeah, this was a really good presentation kind of on the topic of reliable manufacturing, and this will be a great presentation for anyone new to reliability, or maybe for those of you who may be having some challenges on implementing a program or keeping track of your KPIs and your metrics. So be on the lookout for that invitation once we get that date firmed up. But yeah, kind of the underlying theme here was you've got to lay a foundation that will kind of set the course for your reliability program, and that is to determine your strategic intent. So what do you want to be, and then what are the objectives that will get you there? Having that well defined, will kind of set the foundation for your program. But you have to strive to be the best at reliability, productivity, quality, and then organizational effectiveness. But you've got to be able to measure, and again, the basic human need that he mentioned here I thought was kind of key was to see progress. Human need, you've got to see progress, and to see progress, you've got to measure. But the areas that you have to begin thinking about in terms of reliable manufacturing are strategic, your business objectives, again, defining who you are and what you want to be, and then tactical, and then the application part of it. But being able to recognize best practices and measuring through KPIs and measuring yourself against best practices in your industry, that'll get you on a path to better reliability in general. But yeah, certainly being able to measure and having a well-defined business objective, that'll certainly set the foundation for you.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed this one, so we'll look forward to bringing Tim back to talk with us a little bit more about this later this summer. And our last presenter was our good friend Dr. James Neal out of New Zealand, and he had a kind of a mix of some technical information that he talked through, but also some really good leadership talks as well. So his is a presentation that once we have that recording up on our website, I definitely recommend checking out. It kind of had everything all wrapped up in a nice little package. So Doug, maybe you can walk us through specifically the research project that he was talking about, and any of the other key things that you took away from his.
Well, as Maureen said, it's always a pleasure to hear James talk. He has a nice mix of the technical, and he threw in a little bit of leadership, and in general, it's just a pretty fun presentation. So I'd certainly encourage everybody to go take a look at that when we get that up on our website. But some things that James is doing, and University of Waikato is in New Zealand, and New Zealand is unique in the sense that it has a huge number of dairies. They work very closely with a company called Fonterra that is the largest producer of powdered milk in the world. And for a tiny little island, they produce, I can't remember the stat, but it's something like 40 or 50% of the world's powdered milk. Just a huge amount. They have just tremendous number of plants there. So when James puts a research project together, they don't just do it in a lab. They get to go out and put it into practice. So they've been working with a number of dairies and just a large number of motors. And it's no mystery that a lot of the early findings on this project are proven that condition-based lubrication is the key to increased life, better reliability of your rotating assets. So that's no mystery. One of the things that he was talking about, and I think also Chris and the guys from Allied talked about in that workshop, was the 5 rights of lubrication. Make sure it's the right type of lubrication. Make sure it's the right amount of lubrication. Make sure it's put in at the right time, at the right place, and it's the right quality. So those things are telling us that to go out and take an ultrasonic grease caddy, for example, and start a lubrication excellence program based on that is the wrong move. You need all these other things in place. And Dr. Neal talked about a lot of that, where it's just not enough to go out and make sure that you're putting the right amount of grease in, because if it's not the right type, or you're not putting it in at the right time, the whole thing goes wrong. So it's one of those things where you need all 5 of those things in place, including back to what Terry Harris talked about with storage. Everything has to line up for you to even be able to use some of the technologies like ultrasound to make sure you're not putting too much in. So it was a nice way to sort of wrap up the whole idea of condition-based lubrication.
Yeah,
it's
good.
Basically, we're trying to give out as much good guidance as we can, and we're trying to give that guidance based on actual research as well as experience in the field. So we work close with Dr. Neal all the time. He's got a unique situation down there where he has access to a lot of plants, and he's able to go and do some testing and some experiments. So you'll see a lot more coming in the future that's research-based and fact-based, not just people's opinions and that type of thing.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to hearing kind of the final conclusions from that project. Hopefully at next year's event. So that'll be great. So just some final conclusions here. Just some of the sort of little quotes that at least resonated with me. James talks about no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, and obviously the folks that took the time to get down to Florida and join us or speak at the conference in whatever capacity they were there, obviously proves that this is something that they are passionate about, and we know they're going to be successful as a result. You have to design reliability into your operations. Tim Dutton, stressed that, and Doug mentioned that about towards the beginning in regards to the P/F curve and how we maybe need to be backing that up a little bit to even more at the beginning with the design and the implementation and everything. Maintenance is an investment, not a cost. Another great line from Senator Paul Campbell. always great to remind ourselves of that. And Joe Gerlach, practice makes permanent, not perfect. So again, something to keep in mind. Just because you're doing something and doing it often, if you're not doing it right, it's not going to be a good situation for anybody. So this was just sort of the highlights for us. Obviously, there was a whole lot more that was shared and learned in our full week of sessions. And the good news is, as you kind of heard us allude to throughout, we did actually have videographers there, and we videotaped every single presentation, and we will be getting all of those up on our website just as quickly as we can get them back and edited from the videographer team. So we hope you guys will look forward to seeing those and getting to benefit. Obviously, getting to see the whole presentation is going to be better than hearing just some of these highlights that we've been able to share. So we'll be sure to let you all know when those become available. But again, we're so thankful to the folks that came and shared all this great knowledge with us. Moving on from there, I think we're running a little short on time, and I've been trying to keep up writing back and forth with folks who've sent in some questions, and I think we've got most of them answered. So, but anybody that has additional ones, you can always email us or continue to pop them in the window, and we'll get them answered. But I just, for time's sake here, want to get us wrapped up. So again, our website, uesystems.com, we've got the past presentations from all the other ultrasound worlds up there, and soon to have our presentations from 2 weeks ago, in addition to all kinds of other information. We really do want to be a resource. We really, that's part why we do these webinars every month, and why we host the conference. We really want to educate and be a part of your reliability program, and no matter what capacity that you'll have us. And again, as I mentioned, as far as networking is concerned, we hope you'll stay connected with us. Pop onto our UltraProbe users group on LinkedIn. Follow us on Twitter. Check out our Sound Advice blog. We're actually going to have we've got a blog up now that sort of recapped the week, but we're also going to be putting lots more posts up there, kind of recapping some of these lessons on more of a presentation by presentation basis. So be on the lookout for those so you can continue to learn from the conference. And a couple of the save the dates here I mentioned, we're going to have the folks from Novozymes talk about their case study in ultrasound implementation on June 19th. And then in July, we're going to be joined by V. Guidry of DuPont, and he's going to be talking us through his ultrasonic leak detection experiences and his steam trap surveys within DuPont. And we will have the rest of the summer and early fall dates for you guys soon, so be on the lookout for those. And be on the lookout come June for information about our 10th annual Ultrasound World, where we hope you guys will actually all be able to join us, and we'll just have a great crowd down there and lots more opportunities to network and educate. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And as I said, we are recording this webinar, so we'll have this up on our website here in a couple days, and we'll alert you to the fact once it's up there. But thanks, everybody. Thanks, Doug and Adrian, for all your help today. And everybody have a great, safe day and an awesome Memorial Day holiday. And thanks to all of those of you that are out there that have served our country. We really appreciate it. Thanks.